Cummings, and I'm the Legislative Director and Consumer Program Director for MASSPIRG. I want to talk about one of our consumer campaigns that we have just launched. Is our campaign to label genetically modified food. And I hope you guys will pick this as your number one campaign choice going into the spring, because we have a lot of exciting things going on. But first, by way of introduction, I graduated from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst in 1986, and I was, like a lot of you guys, involved in my campus chapter. At the time, I was working to qualify for ballot initiatives, and I know that you guys should all be actually congratulated for the great work that you did on getting the signatures to qualify the updated bottle bill for the ballot. I'm sure, like I was excited at the time to stop studying history and make history by putting that question on the ballot, and we have to ensure that it passes next fall. But so anyway, that's a little introduction on my end. So the campaign to label genetically modified food. Right now, the big problem is that consumers really don't know, and they don't have the information to know what is in the food that they're eating and preparing for their families. And why that's a problem right now is a particular problem around the genetically modified organisms. Most of the food right now in our store shelves contain some amount of GMOs. And while it's particularly problematic because, one, the FDA, who regulates food, requires no independent safety testing of genetically engineered food or genetically modified organisms. And these are created by pesticide companies and big agri-seed companies. So Monsanto is one of the biggest producers of genetically modified foods. There is no independent safety testing done here in the U.S. Because Monsanto and these other companies have patented genes, and they don't let anybody do the independent research, and the FDA doesn't require it. But the public around this area, there really is some cause for concern. There is some information now coming in, primarily from studies overseas, that says that there is concern around health issues. We're seeing correlations with increase in allergies. There's some problems with liver and kidney problems associated with GMOs. And then we do have some hard evidence now that there is an overall increase in the use of pesticides and herbicides with the increase in GMOs. And that is because they designed this genetically modified, mostly BT corn, with pesticides in it, resistant, so that they could then just dump the fields with pesticides and herbicides. And as a result, we're seeing part of the pesticide in that food that we're eating, but then we're just using and dumping a lot of those pesticides in the ground. So there is cause concern, but the bottom line is that while the jury is still out on the health impacts of GMOs, we feel, and the public feels strongly, that we ought to have that right to choose and that right to know what's in that food. And you can do that with a simple label. So here's an example. 63 other countries, by the way, either prohibit the use of GMOs or they're requiring simple labeling. So we have all the ingredients and a whole host of things on a product label. So this is an example, we put it right here in a fact sheet, of a GMO label. And all you do is list with all the ingredients there, genetically modified organisms. That will let those people, the public, who are concerned about eating GMOs, the ability to avoid them. And so that's the campaign that we've got going on. Now, it's not that simple. Companies, we're up against sort of big ag, and these are deep pockets, similar to what tobacco was back in the days when we tried to get labels and health warnings around tobacco. But Monsanto, one of the biggest funders there, has spent over $500 million in the last 10 years just killing all sorts of labeling proposals. There's some proposals in D.C., on the ballot in California and in Washington, and then a lot of state campaigns as well. So we have a well-financed opposition. Monsanto themselves actually has patents on 93% of all the soybeans grown here in the U.S. So they have a huge interest that they're trying to protect there. And in fact, this is kind of funny. It's the only industry where, in order for them to be successful, the consumer has to not know that they're buying it. That's just not right. That's not the way that the U.S. Consumer should be treated, and we ought not to expect that. So the GMO labeling campaign, we've got tremendous momentum going here. Here in the New England area, there's a lot of momentum building. So Connecticut just passed a GMO labeling law. Maine passed a GMO labeling law. And Vermont passed it in one branch and are about to pass it in another one. Massachusetts, I want to be the fourth state to pass a GMO labeling law. Well, it might be the fifth state if Washington, where the question is on the ballot right now, passes. We can do that. We're building that momentum. The polls out there show that 90 to 93% of the public supports labeling. And what we really need to do now is get that momentum that's building out in the field and bring it up into the legislature and have them move. They need to act by July of 2014 in order for it to pass in this legislation. There's been 5 bills filed. We're working with the Committee on Public Health to get the bill moved out of their committee, so that's where it sits now. We had a hearing over the summertime and packed the hearing. There were parents, there were businesses, there were farmers, there were members of the general public, there were Republicans, there were Democrats, people that said, hey, I don't care if you believe that it's a problem or not, but you ought to believe that the consumer should have the choice on whether or not to buy it. And that is the message, and that is the argument, and that is really what's really motivating the public out there. So there's a whole lot of things. If you guys were to get involved, time is of the essence. We have building momentum, and now is the time to act. So if the students across the state were able to get involved and really help to build that public awareness, and then leverage that to push the legislature to act, would be significantly helpful. We are in a coalition right now with MoveOn.org, Right to Know GMO, and MASSPIRG, and we are building a handful of groups of folks that can be spokespeople on the issue to sort of help legitimize it. So we're working, because Massachusetts is such a foodie state and we love our restaurants and we love food, that we want to build a coalition of chefs and restaurants to be for GMO labeling. That was very successful in some legislative campaigns last year. We want to go out and we include parent organizations, PTOs, groups that kind of represent families and kids. That's another voice that we would like to build into the coalition. We have a handful of small businesses already on board. We'd like to see more, and also farmers. We are also thinking about how to, leverage in a corporate campaign to really force some of the supermarkets to think about, hey, what am I doing on GMOs? But that's more to come. So right now we're really building a legislative campaign. We have a big strategy meeting coming up to really figure out where those pressure points are, who can influence whom, and how much and where do we need to focus that pressure. But we have 30 legislative supporters. Every campus is in legislative district where you could focus on your representative and on your Senate. You could work the media, and you can build that coalition and really help build that, take the outside excitement and enthusiasm and demand for GMO labeling and bring it into the legislature, and that will help, I think, make us be successful for passage of the law by 2014.